Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Polytechnique by Denis Villneuve, which BFI have just released on Blu-ray, made in 2009. I'm a big fan of Villeneuve. I think he's arguably the best quote-unquote mainstream filmmaker at the moment. I was really surprised how good Blade Runner 2049 is, because I love the original film. Sicario's a pretty good film. Arrival's very good. Ensemble D, to me, is one of the best films of the 21st century. But Polytechnique is the earliest of his films that are available on Blu-ray. I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find a few films he made before this. I had it on DVD, but I think it was just the French only with no English subtitles, and my French is not very good, so it was just coincidence that BFI actually released it on Blu-ray. You do get a nice booklet. It's very thick, but the key extra that you get with it is Polytechnique, Ce qu'il reste du 6 décembre from 2019, which is a 52-minute documentary by Judith Plamondon, marking the 30th anniversary of the massacre in the Polytechnique in Montreal, Quebec. So it was made the 20th year anniversary. First things first, I'll say it is quite similar to Gus Van Sant's Elephant, which was made in 2003, which was set in a fictional high school, but it pretty much was essentially a reaction to Columbine, which happened in '99. As far as it kind of jumps backwards and forwards in time a little bit, and it's very respectful, and it's not exploitative in any way. So I'll maybe just mention Elephant every now and again. I've done a video on Elephant along with Alan Clark's Elephant in a previous video that you can check out if you wish. But Polytechnique is another really good Villeneuve film. He hasn't really disappointed me yet. Even Prisoners, which perhaps isn't his best, is a good solid film, and Enemy is a lovely little puzzle of a film. So Polytechnique, very much like Elephant, is pretty short. It's only 77 minutes, but again, with a subject matter like this, you know, a 2-hour film would just be too much. But again, it's the nice companion piece with the documentary. So if you watch them back to back, you kind of get a better picture, because there is an underlying subject that's obviously a huge discussion point that I'll get to. But as far as the film is concerned, we do just focus on a couple of main characters. We do see the killer, who I'm not going to name, because again, one of the issues with making films like this, especially this is based in fact, you know, they've changed the names, is we do tend to focus as a society more on the killer in these mass murders rather than the victims. So I'm not going to mention the killer's name. Obviously they do in the documentary, but I think this does a pretty good job of actually, you know, giving a voice to the victims and spending time with the victims. It opens on with a bang, literally. Villeneuve, again, his cinematography is always really polished. Like I said, it's black and white, so it looks pristine. And we have the mundane scene of people photocopying. And then shots start hitting people. Then it kind of goes back. It follows a female character who wants to do aeronautic engineering. It focuses on one of the male students who's struggling a bit. Again, we see the killer, and he is writing the note that would later be found in reality. And we kind of jump forwards and back between the shooting and some character stuff, which works rather well. Again, with Van Sant's elephant, you do get this sense of dread. You do start worrying for characters just because you know what's coming. Obviously we know what's happening. But what makes this mass killing a little bit different, and the documentary really goes into it, is the fact that the killer made a point of targeting women, because at the time in Quebec, the women's movement had really come to the fore. There was an equal pay win in Quebec, so women's lib was to the forefront. So he pretty much decided he didn't like feminists. He viewed all women as feminists, wanting to take away what men have, which is generally the argument for anti-feminists, because to give women equal rights must mean taking something away from men. So he specifically targeted women, and there's a fairly harrowing scene when he goes into the classroom, asks the girls to stand on one side, the boys to stand on the other, and one of the victims one of the survivors, sorry, in the documentary says she just assumed the girls would be all right, because it's women and children first, but he actually gets the guys to leave, and he proceeds to shoot all the women. It is black and white. There is blood, so I don't know whether black and white was a stylistic choice, just not to have copious amounts of red stuff everywhere. It's not particularly violent. It does a good job of kind of just seeing the results of violence, and you'll have, for example, two characters you see hiding, and then we just see the gunman firing into that area, so we don't actually see bullets hit or whatever. Again, it's fairly restrained. It's fairly respectful. It's not, like I said at the start, it's not exploitative. But again, it's unusual because he targeted women. And again, the documentary talks about this in depth, but I'll just finish with the film. Obviously it's difficult because we know what's happening, we know what's going to happen, so like I said, there's a sense of dread. You kind of do worry about the characters. Again, it's just focused on 3 or 4 characters. He eventually shot dead 14 women and injured another 13 or so before he turned the gun on himself. But the documentary really gets into his reasons for doing it, the kind of political impact of that. At the time, the media kind of played down the whole he was attacking women because he hated feminism angle, and were just playing the mad gunman angle, even though he did seem to be fairly rational. He had been turned down to the armed services for being antisocial, whatever that meant. But he felt his life was ruined by feminism and feminists, so that's why he targeted women during the shooting. So it interviews survivors, interviews families of the victims, including a rather uncomfortable watch as one of the police officers that was on the scene actually found his daughter dead. She was the last person that he killed before he turned the gun on himself, and of course, because it was a crime scene, he couldn't actually go and see her lying on the floor. It also interviews newspaper reporters who 30 years later obviously have a slightly different view of it and kind of question how they reported it in the first place and how they maybe should have reported it a little bit differently. Again, it's one of those things, obviously nobody condones going into college and shooting people, but I'm sure depending on your political view, you would say feminism's gone too far, it's not gone far enough, because again, the only thing that humanity does well is pretty much kill each other and argue and fight, which is pretty much what they do. I should say the film stars Maxime Gaudette as the killer, who would later appear as the son in Villeneuve's Incendie the following year. And it also stars Karine Vanasse. I don't know whether she's a relation, Ben. And she co-produced the film, and she also narrates the documentary. So that's a nice through line as well. Again, it's very much like Vincent's Elephant. I don't know how many times I've said the word elephant in this video. It's not a film you're going to watch very often, unless you've got a very strange fetish. But it's very good. I would highly recommend the BFI Blu-ray. Again, it's a beautiful print, like all of Villeneuve's films that I've seen so far. His cinematography's pristine. His use of space, both between characters and space in rooms and geography, is always really beautiful. There's just something about how he drifts his camera through these locations. And the documentary is really good as survivors tell us where the bullets went in and out. And again, how you view feminism is pretty much up to your own political beliefs. But obviously for him it was too much to take. I mean, obviously he probably had psychological problems as well, but that was his reason for doing it. Yeah, it's funny because I don't actually remember hearing about the Montreal shooting. I mean, I know the narrative is that mass shootings tend to happen in America, and certainly America leads the world as far as the numbers, but obviously they do happen elsewhere. If you live in Britain, obviously, if you're a certain age, you'll remember Hungerford, and obviously Dunblane, which was near Stirling University, which is where I went. But I had left the year before Dunblane. So there are always mass shootings, but obviously the narrative is it happens a lot more regularly in America, but they do happen elsewhere. Yeah, again, it's not a film that you're going to watch very often, but I would recommend it, especially if you're a Denis Villneuve fan, because it is excellent, and the documentary's excellent as well. Again, how we view ourselves as a society, how we view men and women, and again how we just can't get on because it seems nowadays that hate is the most powerful force in the universe. Everybody seems to go to the dark side. So thanks very much for watching this cheery and happy random review. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen Polytechnique, or Elephant for that matter, and what do you think of films about mass films about mass shootings, especially ones that actually happened. Are they necessary to kind of get dialogue going, or are they offensive to the victims and the victims' families? I mean, one of the relatives of one of the victims kind of says, you know, in the documentary, I'm not really sure there was any point in making a film, but again, it opens up the dialogue about why these things happen, and why this specific one in Montreal happened. So thanks very much for watching, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews, hopefully ones that might be a little bit more upbeat than this one. But Denis Villneuve, he might not be a great filmmaker, but I think currently he's very, very, very good, and I will be watching with interest for June. But I get sidetracked. So thanks very much for watching, and farewell.